this is Tomlin from TomlinHarmonicaLessons.com, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. Harry Higgs,
Hello.
my brother from another mother. This is the man who I go out and play music with. And yeah, today's lesson is a little bit different. It's a student request on some tips to get started busking. So Harry and I go out busking from time to time, and I thought that it'd be great to have him here to tell us a little bit about how to do it right. So yeah, we're going to start with what is busking, because I know a lot of people don't actually know what busking is. So busking is when you see a musician out on the street playing some music. They usually will have their guitar case open or their hat down on the ground, and they're maybe expecting a little bit of a donation.
An artist donation.
An artist donation.
Yeah.
Some people consider it just a nice way to practice. I think that's quite a big thing to hold on to, isn't it? It's a nice way to get out.
Definitely, you're practicing in public, which is there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with practicing in public.
Yeah.
So now we know what busking is. Let's have a look, for starters, at what equipment I would suggest that you use. So if you're a harmonica player, I think it's so much better if you can go out with a guitarist. So you need to bring one guitarist.
What of me?
Make sure guitarist has a guitar. Make sure you have a harmonica.
Yeah.
You know all this stuff. The useful stuff is getting something like this. So this is a Roland Street Cube, which we go out with. And basically, it's a little amplifier that's battery powered. That's the crucial bit. And both the guitar and the harmonica can plug into it with a microphone.
Yeah.
And we can be nice and loud so that you can be heard on the street, because you might feel quite loud if you're sitting at home jamming with your buddies, but as soon as you're out on the street, you're going to disappear.
Absolutely. And yeah, trying to busk unamplified, you end up really pushing. So if you're trying to play, any subtlety's gone. So you end up strumming really loud and more likely to break a string. You're not going to sound as good, but that's all part of it.
It is all part of it.
Yeah.
And kind of, busking is a different feel to playing a nicely set up gig in a proper gig venue.
Yeah.
I think some of the subtlety goes, but a lot of the engagement and trying to win over an audience member kind of makes up for that. It's quite exciting. So yeah, the kind of microphone that I would suggest, this is something called a Shure SM58. And the reason I'm suggesting this rather than a harmonica microphone is that you're probably going to sing a little bit while you're playing harmonica, and it's much easier if you have the same microphone for singing and for playing harmonica. Harmonica's not going to sound like a big, deep, bluesy Chicago harmonica, but it's going to sound pretty good, and then you can switch between singing and harping with the same microphone. So,
and if you are using a battery-powered amp, this cube in particular has got more than enough channels. So you could run an extra mic if you wanted to, but for argument's sake, there's no point in doing that. You could just run your harp and your vocals through the one channel. Save yourself some hassle. Plus, the more equipment you got, people aren't necessarily going to want to give you money if you're rolling around with all the best stuff.
That's true. And also, you're probably going to have to walk around quite a lot, so you don't want to be carrying a lot of gear.
Yeah.
So in the city where we are, we're in Edinburgh in Scotland, you'll quite often play for a certain amount of time and then you'll get moved on by the police.
Well, not necessarily that. There are a lot of buskers in town as well. Scotland's obviously famous for its bagpipes. So a lot of pipers around town have their favourite spots, but they're not going to be there all the time. But there's a bit of a rotation, and there's a lot of courtesy involved with working alongside other buskers in terms of how much time you can spend in one spot. So you always got to be mindful of the other performers or the people around you.
Yeah. Okay. So this brings us to some kind of top tips for how to approach busking, and I like that you mentioned courtesy, because I think courtesy is really, really important, not just to other people who might want to perform in the same location as you, but also to businesses and residents in that location. Yeah. So what we do when we find a spot that is unoccupied, and by unoccupied, you mean sufficiently far enough away from other musicians, because there's nothing worse than someone rocking up with their super loud amplifier and 10 meters away from you. That's just not cool.
No.
And that's happened to us and we try to avoid it because it's not a very friendly thing to do. So courtesy to other musicians, but you also want to be courteous of businesses and residents. So what we tend to do, we find a spot and we'll go into the shop nearest us and say, do you mind if we play some music? And almost always, if you actually ask, they're very, very happy with it.
And they'll feel less obliged to come out and complain. They probably won't in that position. But if you just do it without asking for permission, you might upset a few people just because you didn't ask.
Yeah, totally. And also, if you say to them, look, if we're too loud, come out and tell us. We'll turn down. Or if you've had enough of us, tell us. We'll move on. Rather than them calling the cops. It's just unnecessary. So yeah.
I mean, some businesses appreciate having buskers outside because they'll find that foot traffic kind of increases around their area. You might filter some more people into their shop, or they might feel the complete opposite, which we've had once.
Yeah, I think, and it has pretty much only been once. Most of the time, people are quite happy. Especially if there's maybe a bar with outside seating, people quite often will sit and drink and listen to music. This
is providing that you're not playing offensive death metal.
Nothing wrong with death metal.
Nothing wrong. But maybe not the Italian restaurant outside eating crowd.
Okay, so this brings me to another good point that we were thinking about, which is although you want to be at a fairly decent volume, having the amplifier and things, you want to be able to give people the choice not to listen to your music. So if you are playing something that might be deemed offensive, like blues music or death metal, play it at a volume that isn't going to upset people, so they can make a choice of walking past you and not having to go like this. Because there's nothing worse than an overly loud busker.
Agreed.
And we've mentioned this before, but we have to compete with bagpipes, which are one of the loudest instruments on the planet.
Definitely most invasive to your senses.
They are quite invasive, it's true. Okay, so other ideas that we were thinking about, one of the big pluses of busking is it's a really great way to test material out that you haven't actually got together enough to play at a gig. And see if it works well. So even if it's a song that you've only just learnt, you can practice it on the street.
It's definitely a good way to perform, just to get out there and perform something new without necessarily needing it to be perfect, but it's a good way to perfect it.
Do you have any problems with someone practicing on the street?
No. I've got no problem with it. So there's this pretense of busking is that you're performing to the public. You don't necessarily need to be performing as in trying to bring people in. If you're making a pleasant noise, sometimes that's enough. And if that is you just practicing away, so if I just want to practice my licks over an E major, I can just do that all day. It's mostly non-offensive, but it's not unpleasant to walk past. Equally as much as if you were, doing a bunch of covers of, I don't know, Tom Petty tunes and somebody's walking past you. It's the same thing. I don't think it's a problem to practice your musicianship at all in any sense.
So this brings us to a really good point, which is don't take it so seriously.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's the thing. Like a lot of you probably have never been on stage before, but you know that that's something you'd like to do eventually, and you're a little bit nervous about how serious being on stage appears to be. Busking is a really nice way into that because you're not necessarily playing to a fixed audience. If people stop and listen to it, it's because they're enjoying what you're doing. But if people keep walking past, you're not continuing to offend them in any way. It's very democratic. You can sit and play, and your objective isn't to entertain everyone who's going past. And that's very cool. Whereas if you're on stage in a venue, you can't go anywhere, they can't go anywhere, and if you're doing a bad job, they might be upset.
But the worst that can happen is that you get folk walking away from you. That's about it, really.
And if people do enjoy it, they make a crowd. And that's something to not be scared of. If you see people stopping and gathering and growing in front of you, that's great. Just keep doing what you're doing, but don't stress out about it. What are your thoughts about someone jamming and kind of holding onto a groove while they're busking?
It's all right. If it feels good, keep doing it.
Yeah. Would you do that at a gig?
Not necessarily, because, you know, occasionally you're going to have form and rehearsed songs and whatnot. You're not always going to get that freedom of opportunity. So if you are doing it busking and there's something that you're doing that you're really enjoying and you're just really in the zone, keep on doing it. No one's going to stop you. Whereas at a gig, they might.
Yeah, I think that is a huge thing. That's part of the reason that I love busking, is that anytime you get into that great groove, you can sit in it for a lot longer than you would if you were playing a gig. You know, we've sat and played a 12-bar blues for 20 minutes without stopping.
Yeah.
And it's been a lot of fun. But if you did that at a gig, I mean, people would kill you.
Yeah.
You'd be lynched.
Yeah.
So that's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else? Any other tips that you can think of for busking?
Don't worry about money in your hat or your case. That's not the point. If you're doing it to earn a living, obviously there's a different sort of pressure there. But you should never judge a busking session by the amount of money that you've made. Because I busked for about 12 hours straight, trying to support myself in LA many years ago. But there was one day I busked for 12 hours and I didn't make a penny. Honestly, not a penny. At maximum $5. But I had such a great day. I was playing, there was so many people around. A lot of people were enjoying it.
Nice weather?
Great weather. But not to mention my playing then, because I was playing all the time. It was great. I was really on form. Felt really good about it. But then there'll be another day where I'd only play for about an hour and a half and make $100. So it's not the point. It doesn't matter how much money you make in a day. That's not the biggest problem.
No.
Deal.
I do think money is an important thing to talk about, though. I think the most important rule of busking, this comes back to courtesy, but if you're busking with someone else and you've made whatever you've made in the hat, you always share it equally.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you had to bring more gear than them. It doesn't matter. You're both playing. You're both involved in the process. It's just polite. Yeah. And I think that I make that argument for gigs, full stop.
Yeah.
Always equal share.
Yeah.
That's really, really important. I think those are all the things that I was thinking about. I think that's a good selection of tips for getting started busking.
Absolutely.
Get out there and do it. It's so much fun. Yeah. I learnt by busking. So I went out there as a hopeless musician and like really, really bad, and I learned very quickly. No, it was awful. It was so. I didn't know what a 12-bar was. Yeah. I remember the sax player being like, "Yeah, can you play an E chord for me?" And so play me an E chord, Harry. And then he's like, "Okay, so do that for a while, and then can you play me an A chord, and then go back to the E chord, and then go to a B chord." And I didn't even know a fancy B chord like that. Yeah, something like that, and then back to the A, and then an E. And I had no idea what that was. And if you don't know what that is, that's totally fine. But those are the three. That's the 1-4-5. That's a 12-bar blues. And then we started doing that a lot because it felt good. And then we started learning about it, and it was great.
Yeah. It is a good way to meet other musicians. We could talk about this all day, man.
We could. That's great.
Yeah. So you can meet many other musicians that just happen to walk past. I've had picks thrown into my guitar case, which I always appreciate. But occasionally you'll get little cards of sax players or piano players or drummers or things like that, and you start building a network, and you really don't know who you're going to bump into, so it can be really good.
It's true.
Yeah.
Should we play a little tune?
Yeah, why not?
All right, I'm gonna get. We're gonna get a different key. Let's get a different key.
Okay.
What key do you want to play?
You're the man with all the harps.
I'm the man with all the harps.
I've got all the keys here.
You've got all the keys. All right. Well, shall we do F sharp?
Why not? Okay.
So you see, this is an important aspect of playing with another musician. Agree on a key.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Kind of groove. Do you want to do a 12-bar?
Let's do a 12-bar.
All right.
But whatever groove you want.
All right. 1, 2, 3.
All right, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this lesson, please give me a thumbs up and hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe to it, because I put out a new lesson every Wednesday, and hopefully Harry will join us again for some more harmonica goodness soon.
Hopefully.
And well, thank you so much for joining us. That was a real pleasure.
Happy to be here.
All right, take it easy. Happy harping.
Bye.